My name is MS Swaminathan, the chairman of the MS Swaminathan Research Foundation. I am plant geneticist originally by profession, and then was a larger area of agricultural research and development.
When you look at today, you see there's a lot of interest again, there's a lot of rhetoric about food security. What prospect do you see of turning the rhetoric into something that's more a reality that will actually deal with hunger?
Well, there is, as you say, a lot of rhetoric about the need for a food-secure world, hunger-free world. We have been hearing it from the time, in fact, during the World War II itself. Franklin Roosevelt and Eleanor Roosevelt convened a meeting in Virginia on working towards a hunger-free world, and that led to the birth of FAO, whose mandate was defined by Dr. B.R. Sen when he was Director General of FAO, as freedom from hunger, although now gradually that focus got lost over there. And the UN Millennium Development Goal again emphasized in the very first among the goal is reducing hunger and poverty by half. But the latest figures are not only we are not reducing, but in the last 2 years we have added another 80 million people to the hungry. The number of hungry now, sometimes classified as $1 per day by the World Bank, is over 1 billion people, children, women and men. And this is a very sad reflection of the human commitment to ending hunger, a sad reflection on the dichotomy between the spoken word and what is done, between deed and action, between lecture and action. Kennedy mentioned it when he inaugurated the World Food Conference in Washington, 1963 or 64, that the world has the technological capacity, it has the financial capacity, it has got everything which can make hunger free. And in 1974 World Food Conference, a resolution was introduced by Henry Kissinger, which said that by 1984, 10 years, 74 to 84, that no child, woman or man should go to bed hungry, and no one's physical or mental potential should be stunted by malnutrition. So these are all words, but achievement has been very slow, achievement has been poor, and the two major hunger hotspots in the world today are South Asia, which has more number of hungry people, and then Sub-Saharan Africa, which is the second in the order. In both cases, I do not find a technical, political, or economic excuse for the persistence of hunger.
So you've written about this over many decades, and I was reading one of your papers about the role of science. What would you actually say we need to do? Because even the Green Revolution, well, it increased production, still didn't mean everyone got fed. The problems are never just scientific or technical, they're much more political and economic. How do we get over this problem?
We know we need to do several things, but let me list about 5 of them, which in my view are very important. And they should not be looked in isolation, it should be looked in its totality. If you find the areas where there is high prevalence of hunger, those are areas where the soils are degraded, soils are both hungry and thirsty, and there is also very little infrastructure available, and the farmers are very marginalized, impoverished people. Now, first thing we should do is to develop an integrated agricultural production strategy which involves 5 major components. First is soil health care, soil health in its totality. Every farmer should have a soil health passbook, just as we have our own human health records. What is wrong with the physics of the soil, the chemistry of the soil, the microbiology of the soil. So soil, Aristotle mentioned it long ago, soil is the stomach of the plant. So if something wrong with your stomach, you have always stomach ache. So soil is important. Then water. Water again, I won't say the global water situation is bad in its totality. There are areas, desert areas, semi-arid areas, where rainfall is scanty. But even here, in my own country, 2 of my very close friends, the late Anil Agarwal and Sunita Narayan, have catalogued what they have called dying wisdom. How in the desert regions of Rajasthan, very arid regions of Rajasthan, still people have been able to, with 100 millimeters of rain, they have been able to conserve every drop of rainwater and use it for domestic purpose, for some sheep, husbandry and so on. Well, there are areas in India like what we call Cherrapunji or Sora in Meghalaya, in the northeastern part of India, where 14,000 millimeters of rainfall occurs. But still, if you go between November, December to March, April, you won't even have water, drinking water. So first thing is the water, rainwater harvesting, conservation of the rainwater, and its sustainable and equitable use. All the 5 sources of water, the rainwater, the river and surface water, the groundwater, and all recycled, purified water, in other words, all the waste water or wasted water, I will call it, which has been purified again and recycled. And finally, the vast source of seawater, which is 90% of the world's water source. Seawater farming is possible today, very good seawater farming. So I would say land and water. Then comes the biodiversity, the variability in material. Variety is the spice of life, we say. Enormous variability occurs, and this year is the bicentenary of Charles Darwin. And what Darwinism is not possible but for the occurrence of variability. There is no scope for selection if there is no variability. Therefore, the very foundation of Darwinism is based upon variability in nature, and we have lost a lot of variability. Gene erosion has also been accompanied by habitat destruction. Many times forests have been opened up for agriculture, what is called shifting cultivation, slash and burn techniques, which are still in progress. So we should conserve the biodiversity and select materials adapted to not only very high production, but more important for risk distribution, risk avoidance. Because the earlier agronomy was risk avoidance agronomy, not so much profit maximizing agronomy. With the event of a climate change, this becomes much more important. The fourth area is credit and insurance. For the people who have small farms, they require some credit to buy the inputs. The insurance is very important because in this year in India, we have had very uncertain and very aberrant rainfall. A lot of farmers have borrowed money from money lenders, from the banks. There is no proper insurance and they are not able to repay the loan. They become further indebted and finally they end up in suicides, which is very sad because I always have felt agriculture is a life-giving profession. If those who are giving life to others, farmers, if they have to take their own lives, then something very wrong, very radically wrong, which we should look into very carefully. Finally, the whole area of technology services, like extension service, input supply service. If I say to a farmer, I have a new variety of crop which is doing very well, rice or wheat or corn, the first thing he will ask me, where are the seeds? Can you give me some seed? And we should also promote not only in technology, purely mineral fertilizers, chemical pesticides, but what I have called evergreen revolution, from green to evergreen revolution. The green revolution was based on a commodity-centered approach, that is like wheat, rice, corn, sorghum, millet. But the evergreen revolution, which I defined 30 years ago as increasing productivity in perpetuity, without ecological harm, without associated ecological harm, that is based on a systems approach, farming systems approach. It has 2 methods of achieving evergreen revolution. It can be organic farming. If you want to take organic farming, production yield will go down because, as I said earlier, our soils are both hungry and thirsty. Therefore, nutrients are needed, inputs are needed for output. But on the other hand, we can, if those who are real organic farmers, we should promote things like fertilizer trees, green manure plants. There are very good fertilizer trees, Faberhabia albida, for example, in Africa, which fixes a lot of nitrogen in the soil. So you must think of how to build up soil fertility under organic farming without the use of mineral fertilizers. But what I normally recommend to small and marginal farmers who do not have cattle, who do not have animals, and therefore cannot get animal manure, is to use what we call green agriculture. Green agriculture means integrated pest management, integrated nutrient supply. We don't say don't apply fertilizer at all, but the minimum quantity. If I'm a rice farmer wanting to produce 4 tons of rice per hectare, I have to give the rice plant 100 kilograms of nitrogen. Now I can give it all through mineral fertilizer, or I can put some green manure, compost, whatever I can, 30, 40, 50, 60 kilograms I can give through organic manure, and 40 kilograms urea, mineral fertilizer. So we need technologies which are suitable, which are affordable, which are economically and politically and socially feasible in an area. That's very important. And part of this final fifth group of issues is assured and remunerative marketing. Many people don't understand that in India, the Green Revolution, technology is a primer of change. We had the new varieties of wheat and rice or hybrids of corn, which could take more nutrients from the soil and convert them into grains, and which can also absorb more water because semi-dwarf, they won't fall down. But the trigger of the Green Revolution was assured and remunerative marketing. The government announced before sowing a remunerative price, and they established a Food Corporation of India which bought the grains, whatever quantity. Now this year, the government of India, fortunately, to our good fortune, has nearly 55 million tons of wheat and rice in their godown. Well, how did it happen? Because they announced a very remunerative price, which was recommended by the National Commission on Farmers, chaired by me. That is total cost of production, C2 we call it, including farmers' own labor, plus 50% more, a margin of 50%. That came in last year in the case of wheat, 1,080 rupees per quintal. The rupees now nearly 50 rupees per dollar, US dollar. That was a good price, 50% more margin. For the first time, the government did it, accepted our recommendation of the National Commission on Farmers. Now, because of that, the government could purchase over 20 million tons of wheat and another 25 million tons of rice. And that has been our saving grace this year in the midst of all the drought and the other problems we have. In India, food, grain reserves and seed reserves. Grain reserves are important for food security. Seed reserves are important for crop security. Because one crop fails because of drought, farmers won't have seeds. So seed reserves are important. So I say, when you bring all these together, land care, soil health care, water harvesting, water sustainable use and management, credit and insurance, appropriate technology supported by services, and above all, assured and remunerative marketing, then there is no particular secret. But how to bring them all together? That is why in the 1960s we called it a Green Revolution Symphony. Symphony, everybody had played their part. The political leader played their part, the scientists played their part, the extension officers played their part, the marketing people, the purchasers played their part, and above all, this gives enormous enthusiasm for farmers.
But what you describe is so far away from the current orthodoxy, don't you think? FAO's figures, when they looked at biodiversity, and the conference in 1996 pointed out that the major loss of diversity in agriculture were because of the kind of modern farming systems. The approaches that governments have taken in the last 20 or 30 years has been to neglect agriculture. A lot of investment has gone. The focus has been on the fossil fuel intensification of agriculture, not building upon the traditional knowledge you were talking about. It seems to me what you're describing is very good and would give a solution, but it is very far from where the politics are and where the current economists are. Would you agree?
No, I agree it is far, but it need not be far. The point I am trying to make is, in the 1960s it was not far. We could bring all the pieces together. Partly you may say, it was a big calamity. In 1964, there was India's independence was born in the backdrop of the Great Bengal Famine, 1942-43, where 3 million children, women and men died out of hunger. And that was during the World War II. There was no possibility of bringing food from Burma. Had been occupied by the Japanese. Burma was a great source of supply of rice to India before the World War II. Therefore, 3 million children, women and men died. So when India became independent, Jawaharlal Nehru said, everything else can wait but not agriculture. Because he had seen what the children, women and men die out of hunger, and he couldn't do anything at all. So he said he will give priority. In the 60s, but we were continuing to have problems. Not famine per se, but chronic and endemic hunger, malnutrition, hunger. Even today, it is very widespread in India. So in the 64, there was a very big famine-like condition in Bihar. Drought, big drought. Fortunately, at that time, 1966, 10 million tons of wheat were imported from the US and Canada, PL 480 program, concessional supplies. That saved the country. But on the other hand, at that time, Indira Gandhi became Prime Minister. And she said, this is not on. We can't lead a ship-to-mouth existence. We must reverse the paradigm. We must produce more, we must help the farmers more, and we must also build up enough grain reserve for a bad day, for a day when you don't rain. Now, fortunately, at that time, because of the pressure of circumstances, the Americans also put a lot of pressure. They said, what is all this? You people, you are an agricultural country. 80% of your people are in agriculture, and you can't feed yourself. And it was very insulting remarks everywhere. So, a calamity is also an opportunity. Adversity creates also a new policy. At that time, for the first time, I have not seen it afterwards also, everybody came together. The scientist, the extension worker, the farmer, the politician. Indira Gandhi came and opened up our seed villages. Today I can't get a prime minister for such purposes. So it only showed what Kennedy said rightly. If there is a political will, professional skill, and farmers' action, if these three can come together, the political will reflected by enough investment in all the mentioned points, and the professional skill, which should be not an idealistic, I must take into account social engineering in this country is as important as technology. So a scientist and social scientists must come together. That is what I call the fusion of professional skill. Finally, in India, farming is the largest private sector enterprise. Even today, 2/3 of our population, of 1.2 billion, for them farming is not just a food producing machine, it's the backbone of the livelihood security system. Therefore, these people who are producing the food, if they have no enthusiasm, today, 2 years ago, the National Sample Survey Organization took a survey of farmers. 45% of farmers said they want to quit farming if there's another option. Now, under these conditions, our Prime Minister may go on talking about second green revolution. I've told him, no green revolution, anything will come when 45% of your farmers want to quit farming. First analyze why they want to quit farming. What is the reason?
Can we pick up on that? Because the image India has been projecting abroad is of into the new technologies, the dynamic economy. It's not one that says agriculture is really important, is a core element. It's where people are looking today is not at farming as a good thing, something to go into that young people should develop and want to be in. How do you see that changing?
Those who think this way do not understand the economics of human dignity and human survival. They think of money, 9% growth rate, 9.5% growth rate. When there was 9.5% growth rate, all the data of FAO, the World Food Programme, the International Food Policy Research Institute, they went on pointing out 45% of women and children in this country are malnourished. Every third child born is underweight. In other words, you're denying the child, even at birth, the opportunity for a healthy and productive life. Therefore, whatever you say or write about India, if you say the opposite of it, both will be true. That's what happens in many parts. So one part of people will only see, like the blind person and the elephant, they will describe one part. But the whole elephant is a sad story. The whole elephant is sick. The whole elephant is a sad story. Therefore, we must now look at the problem in its human dimension, not growth rate of 9%, 5% and so on. The economics of human dignity. See, Gandhi in my country said, everybody should be enabled to earn their daily bread, not given the daily bread. He was very clear. Don't make people into beggars. Food with human dignity was his. So give them work. That's what now is happening with the National Rural Employment Guarantee Program. At least some work is being given. So that I have a feeling I was not a beggar. I worked, I got some money, and I bought the food. So I would say India's position is an enigma. India is the greatest enigma. On the one hand, our nature is the prosperity of the nature and poverty of the people stare you in the face when you travel in the countryside. And our natural resources are being denuded. And the result will be those who ignore the realities, who want to not look at the problems in its face, they will find increasing social unrest, what we call Naxalite movement, Mao movement. They are increasing in the country. I have studied this problem in parts of Jharkhand and others, and I find these so-called Naxalites are young people, angry young men and women who are disgruntled with the present system of gross iniquity, of gross injustice. Therefore, the cost, India will face a very severe social cost if it is going to live in a world of illusion in terms of the well-being of Indian economy and Indian the health and educational status, the human resource. I would say the countries which undervalue the human resource and overvalue material resources will always remain poor. This is what is happening in the country. We have overvalued our material resources like land. Land price in Delhi is very high, abnormally high, but we have undervalued the human being. And so long as it happens, poverty will persist.
You said before, sometimes catastrophes are opportunity. Climate change could be the biggest catastrophe human beings have ever brought upon themselves. Is that also an opportunity, and is that something that might galvanise change in India?
Climate change is certainly a great opportunity in one sense. It has come as a wake-up call to humankind. This is not on. But we also know the countries which have not contributed to climate change will be the worst sufferers, whether it is sub-Saharan Africa or South Asia. Those who have not either not made or made very little contribution. Because any calamity, the poor nations and the poor in all nations, I wouldn't say even the United States or Europe, poor will suffer more. For example, throughout history, along with great, I have traveled in the Sahel during the famous Sahelian drought of 1983-84. I was president of IUCN, the World Conservation Union. I found the rich people didn't die out of hunger. It is only the poor who died out of hunger. Therefore, the poor will suffer more. So the climate change, if it leads to two important results, one is that we must all move to sustainable lifestyles. It is not only the poor nations who should move to sustain. Already they are in the bottom of sustainable lifestyle. The very poor man makes no demand on nature at all, and water and so on. We only those who have flush out toilets. In India, 10% of the people have flush out toilets. They use all the water, which is the other fellows have nothing. So what we need is a greater human consciousness of the need to examine our own lifestyles and all avoidable consumption. Unsustainable lifestyles and unacceptable poverty must become both problems of the past if the climate change has a meaning. The other thing is climate change, it provides an opportunity to you to harness modern science and technology, the best available knowledge, to adapt and mitigate both of them, the clean energy policies, what we should have done long ago, whether it is clean coal, renewable energy. This country has so much of solar energy, but now only as a result of climate change, investment is coming in the solar energy field. So we hope it will produce investment in terms of clean energy sources, solar, wind, biogas, and so on. Biogas is a very good method, and biomass utilization. Every calamity is an opportunity to learn lessons, to make progress. But if the rich people can think that, they can continue with their own lifestyles and somehow provide some money to the poor to adapt themselves, I think climate change will get worse rather than better.
One of the core things you're saying, this is about equity, both within a country and between countries. So if you look at the North, the countries of Europe and the United States, what specifics would you like to see them doing? And do you think that in India there's a sense that, well, we're going to carry on doing what we're doing even though it's going to contribute to greenhouse gases because they cause the problem, and it's unless they change, we're not going to change, and that will damage all of us?
I don't think today it can be a political rhetoric that you can go on arguing endlessly. That will happen in Copenhagen and so on. Who is the culprit, what. But the point I'm trying to make is whoever may be the culprit, the worst sufferers will be the poor in all nations, and the poor nations in particular. Therefore, in countries like India, it is in our national interest that we look at our own people, those who are living unsustainable lifestyles. We go back, in this country was full of, when I was a young boy in Kerala, the lifestyle was very sustainable. You can't make a man who is poor or rich. Everybody went to school, everybody went to, they dressed alike and so on. So we must, in India, the land of Gandhi and land of Buddha and so on, we should show that we will be leaders in the area of sustainable lifestyle, sustainable living, and mobilization of all form of renewable energy, particularly solar, wind, biomass, biogas, and so on. And we should not just be preaching to others. We should try to set an example to others that this can be done, this should be done. It is in our common interest, in the enlightened self-interest of all people inhabiting the planet. Ultimately, it's only enlightened self-interest which is a trigger for cooperation. So we have to make that point. It is in the enlightened self-interest of all the people in the globe that we cooperate in ensuring. First, put a stop. At L'Aquila, the G8 and the others agreed 2 degrees centigrade, we must put a cap over the pre-industrial area. Even that will create a lot of problem in India from the point of view of crops like wheat and rice. Nevertheless, whether it is 2 degrees, work together, let us all work together for a common goal and ensure this is achieved. At the same time, let us not have a blame game. As I said, you can't reverse history, whatever has happened. But even today I see in the United States, when I go to some places, huge limousines, one person sitting. It looks almost off the road. I feel, what is this person doing there with one limousine? Now, all this should become, they should not be condoned by society. There should be social ostracism against very unsustainable and ostentatious lives.
You mentioned the using of new technology. Do you think the way that the rules on patents and other forms of intellectual property have been extended around the world could inhibit sharing knowledge that we need today? And do you think, too, that sometimes there's an overemphasis on one particular technology because it's new and exciting, like biotechnology, when in fact the kind of things you were talking about are much more complex? They actually require a lot more detailed knowledge and action across a wide range of areas, from water to land management.
Well, this is very true in terms of how we are going to move to a new paradigm of development, a new paradigm of shift. But in this technological era, unfortunately, when I was working actively developing new varieties and so on and spreading it, the idea of intellectual property did not at all occur in mind. No question of patenting, no question of... We could also exchange. I wrote to Norman Borlaug, next day he sent some seeds. I sent him some seeds. It was a partnership in the common struggle for a hunger-free world. That partnership has now been diluted because for 2 reasons. Public good research is receiving much less attention and much less support. Universities, government institutions, any public good, both in health, medicine. Formerly, when I was young, we had only the government hospital. We didn't have any. But today, everybody goes to only to private because we have run down. All the public hospitals have been run down, very bad, sad condition, without support, without fund. Now, intellectual property rights are all right if it is a question of making money in some new discovery. But in areas related to food and health security and environmental security, I would say there must be compulsory licensing of rights. Should not be exclusiveness. It must be inclusive in terms of all technologies which are good for the environment, a new energy source, which are good for food and agriculture, for food health. After all, in Doha negotiation, South Africa and others said, what are the use of HIV/AIDS vaccines if those who need it cannot afford to have that vaccine? So it was decided in those cases compulsory licensing of rights will be done. But in another case, for example, this Swiss scientist Ingo Potricus and accompanied by a German scientist Bauer, they developed a new kind of rice which contains a lot of vitamin A or beta carotene as it's called. And vitamin A deficiency is widespread over a large number of children, poor children. So this rice can provide some. But we found it was covered by 12 or 15 patents, that whole discovery. Fortunately, the Swiss started what they call a humanitarian trust, and they bought off the patents. The humanitarian trust has now made available the genetic factors to India and other countries. One way of doing it is to develop such mechanism to buy the patents and make it available. But I believe both Gandhi, again I will quote, he said, you must hold yourself as trustees, both of your intellectual property and financial property. Don't consider yourself to be owner. You think yourself as a trustee of your wealth, he called it intellectual wealth and financial physical wealth. I think that concept of trusteeship, of a human well-being, of common good, of public good, must come from school children onwards.
Both the Green Revolution and modern biotechnology and genetic engineering have come in for a lot of criticism as well as praise. What's your view about that?
As far as the Green Revolution is concerned, you see, what has gone wrong, I call it a greed revolution, not green revolution. Greed revolution. And because green is a good color. Without green color, we won't live today. It's the color of the chlorophyll, the green plant. That's the only one which is capable of doing something from sunlight. So there was nothing wrong. Even the German Environment Party is called the Green Party. So green is the color of the environment. But what went wrong is the excessive exploitation of the groundwater, excessive exploitation of soil. It was soil mining, not soil cultivation. Water mining, not water harvesting and use. And strangely enough, I had a hunch of this. As early as 1968 January, long before the term Green Revolution was coined, I gave a lecture in the Science Congress at Varanasi, where I warned the farmers, don't overexploit the groundwater, don't do monoculture, don't replace hundreds of local varieties with one or two high-yielding varieties, because genetic homogeneity enhances genetic vulnerability to pests and diseases, and don't overcount soil. Then that is why that led me to the coining the term evergreen revolution, sustainable agriculture, green revolution in perpetuity without ecological harm. So I had foreseen in some respects, and I was doing my best to warn. And when I became the head of the Indian Council of Agricultural Research, the first thing I did was to strengthen our whole research on ecological farming, integrated pest management, integrated nutrient supply, put up a large number of demonstrations, lab-to-land demonstration, operational research project. But still, in the Punjab, Haryana, the heartland of the Green Revolution, farmers felt, if I produce 1 ton more, I will get several thousand rupees more, and so on. That's what I call the Green Revolution. I said, live in harmony with nature. Do not overexploit nature. So I find it is not, you see, real Green Revolution started in the state of Iowa in the United States in the 1940s with hybrid maize, hybrid corn. That was the first major invention a variety which could trigger a higher yield. Because Green Revolution, another term for improving production through productivity improvement, not through area expansion. And we can't have no more area. But what went wrong was the abuse of the production potential by overexploitation of land, water. Farmers have come to realize it now. That is why suddenly the organic farming has become prominent. I used to quote in my lectures in the 60s Rachel Carson's book on Silent Spring, which was an early warning at that time in 64. Even a Nobel Prize winning technique of Muller on DDT became the cause of so many problems later on. Because science you can never foresee or foretell, but you can make an action-reaction analysis. Keep your eyes open and see what is happening. And that is why I coined this term evergreen revolution, because there is no other way except improve productivity in perpetuity because the population is growing. So I would say the green revolution was abused, the technology was abused, and the first foreign country I went in 1949 was Holland. I was working in the polder lands of Holland against a disease called Heterodira rostakensis, golden nematode of potato, golden nematode. That was my first major research work. And I found there, almost for 80, 90 years, people are harvesting 8 to 9 tons of wheat per hectare because they had very good in water management. They had very good soils department, soil fertility. So there's nothing wrong with the green revolution. What is wrong with how you use the technology and how you overexploit? Biotechnology is something which started developing. Of course, biotechnology has many dimensions. For example, bioprocessing, fermentation, these are all old days. You have, including cheese making. They are also biotechnology. Even making butter is a biotechnology. But modern biotechnology started in 1953 with the Watson and Crick discovery of double helix. They were both batchmates of mine. I was in another lab nearby. They were in Cavendish lab. I was in the Plant Breeding Institute, but we were very near. And I was also in Cambridge during that time. I didn't know they are going to make such a far-reaching discovery. I used to run across to them and say hello, but we never thought they are going to become shakers of a new, the birth of a new genetics. Anyway, coming back from 1953, we have now 56 years of experience with modern molecular genetics. The recombinant DNA technology developed later. And it started, and methods of transferring genes through agrobacterium, tumefacins, and so on started. That made it possible for you now to start breeding varieties at the molecular level. So from Mendelian to molecular genetics, one could go. This has been the dream of all geneticists, that we should be able to what we'd call precision breeding. We just take only that segment of DNA and put it here. And fortunately, several methods of transfer were identified. Nothing wrong with this, and it has opened up completely new opportunities in the world, because today the old concept of species is no longer valid. Linnaean species one, a species one which will not cross with the other. Today we can cross them by parasexual methods, not necessarily by sexual methods. But what is wrong is when you take genes from completely different species and transfer them to new crop varieties, food varieties. There is no problem in biotechnology and medicine. Nobody is questioning the need for new vaccines, insulin, all produced. People are all quite happy. They are all wanting biotechnology to solve the problems of Alzheimer, Parkinson's disease, and so on. So there is no problem. It is only in food biotechnology, whether it is corn or soybean or rice or now what we call eggplant. In this country, there's the eggplant or the aubergine. All them, people are asking, why do you want to put alien genes here? What will be its impact on food, health? What will be its impact on food safety, biosafety? What will be its impact on the environment, biodiversity? And you see, the controversy in food biotechnology started essentially with the question, who will control the biotechnology? Who will control the technology? Is it Monsanto, Syngenta, the big people are going to control? What is going to happen? They will all be under patent rights, intellectual property rights. The Green Revolution was a public good enterprise. The Gene Revolution is a private sector enterprise. How do you make a private sector enterprise serve the cause of public good? These are all important issues which develop. Nothing to do with technology. Some of them are purely social, some of them ethical, There is ethical dimension of doing experiments like cloning in human being. I'm not talking about that kind of thing. But the food biotechnology. So what people have to be assured is, A, that good technology will be available to everybody. There will be social inclusion and access to technology. If I produce a new variety of rice, as my colleague Ajay Preda is doing, by transferring genes for saltwater tolerance to mangrove, or my other young colleague Suja George, she is doing, transferring genes for drought tolerance. They have got wonderful material. But this is a public good institution. Although we are not a government institution, we are a non-governmental organization, but we are committed to our mandate, pro-poor, pro-nature, pro-woman orientation to technology development. So we are committed to make available all material for participatory breeding. We consider ourselves a pre-breeding center. A pre-breeding center is one which creates novel genetic combination. Then I give it to the farmers and work with them participatory. So pre-breeding plus participatory breeding is the recipe for sustainable agriculture. So because I can have my salt-tolerant gene in numerous varieties, not one patented variety or hybrid. Companies will go only for hybrids because they feel hybrids means farmers have to buy the seed every year. Monsanto used to charge 1,500 rupees per kilogram of cotton seed, BT cotton seed, as straight value. And many farmers take it up, their crops fail because the rain has failed, they have taken money from the money lender and end up in suicide. So I would, in relation to genetic engineering, let me say, molecular breeding, the problems are not just technological. The problems are not just technological, they are social. There are other questions like IPR, access to technology have been involved, monopolies developing. People will say, will 5 or 6 companies control food security in the world? Because they have the technology, others we don't have. Therefore, the biotechnology debate in developing countries has got mixed up with social issues and also scientific issues. That is why in India, when the committee I chaired, I recommended National Biotechnology Regulatory Authority by an act of parliament, which will be a strong professional body, completely transparent, with a strong bioethical component. Bioethics and biosafety will be the 2 legs of the organization. On one hand, ethical dimensions of technology, the other safety dimensions of technology.
I suppose one last question is, looking back over your long experience and looking ahead, are there any key things points you want to make that we haven't covered?
Looking back, I have seen the power of synergy between technology and public policy. Nobody thought in the 60s, people thought that I am talking nonsense. I was younger, 47 years younger in the 60s. In fact, BBC in 1964 or 65, he came to cover India's what was called the famine in Bihar famine. Mr. Philip Dalby, I think his name, if I remember correctly. I was then working in my wheat field in the Indian Agricultural Research in New Delhi. 66 drought year. Then he came and suddenly said, I have taken a lot of gloomy pictures of India. I have gone to Bihar, starving people, children, emaciated children. But I met yesterday somebody who said, you are an optimist. So I traced you and I have come here. Now let me record what you want to say. I said, it is true we have problem, but the wheat harvest of 1968 will mark a turning point in our agricultural destiny and our agricultural history, because we will have, if everything goes well between now and 66, 67, 68, we will have a revolutionary progress in agriculture. He didn't believe it. But in 68, Indira Gandhi, July, released a special stamp called the Wheat Revolution. And he was good enough to drop me a note saying, what you said at the time I didn't believe, but I am very happy for your country that what you said came true. So it can be done. Things seemingly impossible tasks can be achieved. I am confident. If all will play, the political leaders will play in a democratic society. They will not do slip service, they will not do just a sop, but they will really come to bricks. But what is worrying is, to me, is not so much technological possibilities of increased food production, that can be done, but population increase and employment opportunities. Again, the Gandhiji's concept of earning your daily bread. Agriculture is job-led growth. Modern industry is jobless growth. Only agriculture means, I am saying, crop husbandry, animal husbandry, fisheries, forestry, agro processing. That can provide more jobs and income. But today agriculture is in distress, and somehow modern industry has been, all the public policy is to favor whether it is IT, whether it is other kind of modern industry. I don't think we are thinking of how to provide employment opportunities, to earn their daily bread, to not convert people into doles, and that aspect is not receiving attention. The population growth has gone out of political focus. Nobody is talking today about population. India is increasing 1.5 Australia's population every year adding 1.5 Australia's to our population. 18 million children. How are we going to face it? I have no easy solution. I have solution to produce more food. I do not have solution to enable everybody to have access to that food. Not through dole, by their own purchasing power, balanced diet. This worries me, why people are not concerned with population stabilization policies. China, I pay a tribute to them, because whatever you may say about the method they are adopting, they are very clear that population growth of this kind is unsustainable, because population carrying capacity of the ecosystem has been exceeded. Look at, I have got the latest science magazine in front of me, and it is the science from the United States. This is the 14th August. The lead article says, Northern India's groundwater is going, gone. Huh? That is the problem. But Northern India's population is increasing enormously. How are you going to face it? So, the so-called sustainable lifestyle, sustainable development, sustainable living, reducing your wants, reducing your ostentatious lifestyles, is the need. India had the tradition in the past. It can still show the way, 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 still show the